Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
And glad to have with us on our live line this morning, Republican Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes. Assemblywoman, thank you for being with us.
Good morning, and I'm glad to have this opportunity.
Wanted to start out with the closing of the prison, Wlea, over in Livingston County.
Oh, this is going to be devastating to Livingston County. Livingston Correctional Facility, I mean, it was only built in 1991. It's a pretty new prison. Amazingly enough, the state has just spent millions of dollars in taxpayer money to make this a state-of-the-art great facility. They've updated all the electrical. They put in charging stations for inmates' laptops, which I wouldn't agree with, but it is an upgrade. In January, they just finished an $8.4 million taxpayer-funded water project to bring water into the facilities to both Livingston and Groveland correctional facilities from Hemlock Lake. And literally, as we speak, they're spending $5.5 million to put new roofs on the entire correctional facility, and that's going to continue even after the prison's closed. I mean, this is just it's a shame, both because of the amount of taxpayer money, millions of dollars that apparently are going to be wasted on a prison that's closing, but also because of the people that are involved. I mean, these are our corrections officers, our civilian employees that work there, you know, people that live and work behind the scenes of those prison walls, you know, doing unseen jobs and seeing things we don't even want to know about in order to make us as safe as possible on the outside. My heart just bleeds for everybody.
Assemblywoman Byrnes, is this coming from, and I've talked about this a lot of times on our show, so apologies to our listeners, but it's been a running theme that I've been talking about. The whole idea of the New York City Democrats having the attitude that all prisoners are falsely accused, that law enforcement and prison guards are the problem, prisons are unnecessary, everybody in there is a drug user and not a drug dealer, and they're small-time offenders doing too much time, and there's no exceptions to any of that, apparently, with the New York City Democrat attitude, or very few exceptions. Would you agree with my analysis?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I was a prosecutor for 7 years and a judge for 10, and for the last 11 years before I retired, I was the law clerk to a judge in Livingston County. You know, are there people who we do find out after the fact have been falsely accused or falsely convicted? Yes, that has happened. I can't deny that, and that's tragic. But usually it's because somebody has lied under penalty of perjury and has testified in a court. And sometimes it's law enforcement, regrettably, but that's a real exception. More frequently, it's civilians who, for whatever reason, have a grudge or want to get somebody so that they'll testify falsely. But those are still so minor in numbers in comparison to the people that are behind our prison walls. And it takes a lot to go to prison. There are so many people arrested for the first time, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on, who get breaks. First, we'll adjourn it and dismiss it. Then we'll reduce it to a disorderly conduct, then a misdemeanor, because we all know that our prisons are expensive to operate, and they are dangerous. And nobody wants anybody in a prison unless they deserve to be there and have earned being there.
Talking to Republican Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes. Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, before I move on to my next question, you have a press conference coming up later this morning, I believe, on this topic?
I do, at 11 o'clock. Originally, I was going to do it right along the road in front of Livingston Correctional Facility, but the superintendent of the facility told me yesterday that he had been in contact with the commissioner's office in Albany. They determined exactly what their property lines were, and that their property line went right up to the road, and that I was not allowed on state property.
That happened recently, I believe, to Senator O'Mara and Assemblyman Palmisano when they wanted to give a press conference, I believe. We're talking to Republican Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes. The governor put out a statement on Twitter saying that, and we had this on our news this morning, coal is a relic, and New York City will be shutting down the last coal plant in 2020. Then on top of that, there's news that an energy news-related story that there's legislation called the Climate and Community Protections Act, which will work towards getting 50% of all electricity in New York State by the year 2030 to be generated by wind and solar. Your thoughts on the governor's wanting to get rid of everything related to coal and promote everything related to wind and solar?
I think it's totally unrealistic. It's just not the way our society is developed, and I don't think it's necessary. I totally support renewable energy in the right circumstances, but I really want communities to want the projects, not to have the government and the state push them down our throats. Right now, if a project gets big enough, and a lot of them are getting up to large sizes, local control is gone. We can't argue to our town supervisors and our town board why this program shouldn't exist or that program. It automatically goes to the state, and what they decide rules. I absolutely think that we should allow our local governments, the people who are closest to us, decide what they think is right for each community.
Assemblywoman Byrnes, New York Times, I don't know how much you've talked about this issue, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. New York Times editorial board came out against Governor Andrew Cuomo for not being more pro-vaccine. Apparently, the governor's view, and this is a big thing down in New York City, so we won't spend a lot of time on this, but there's been a measles outbreak in downstate New York, and the governor has been sympathetic to the groups that don't want to have vaccines for religious objection reasons. The New York Times is supporting, in their editorial, State Senator Brad Hoylman, the New York City Democrat. Basically speaking, Hoylman wants to make a law that all children get the vaccines without exceptions. Did you have any thoughts there?
I absolutely can understand the need to have everybody in our society be safe from a lot of these diseases that have been substantially beaten down. But I'll tell you, I have gotten literally thousands and thousands of letters and emails and phone calls from people, not just in the district, but all over the state, who are concerned about their rights as parents to make decisions about their children and what substances are put into their children's body. So, it is going to be a very volatile issue when it hits the floor of the Assembly. Passions are running very, very deep on both sides. I've done my best to listen to both sides of the argument, and I think everybody will know where I eventually come down when it's time to vote.
There's another big issue in the news these days that's a big local issue. And you've put out a statement about it, opposing it. The idea of unionizing family farms so that they have to be subject to the rules and regulations of other businesses. Your thoughts on unionizing family farms?
A couple of thoughts. First, I am against it. I've been visiting a lot of our farms. I have joined the Farm Bureau, as we've talked about before, and even have spoken to farm workers. This isn't an industry that works 9 to 5 or has specific shifts. You can go through the winter and barely work or not even be around if you're, working on the farm as opposed to the owner. And then when it's time to put the crops in the ground, when it's time to harvest, you're going 24/7 because the job has to be done, and it has to be done in a timely fashion. Last night at 11 o'clock, I wanted to talk to my chairman of the Board of Supervisors about my press conference today, and he wasn't available until this morning because at 11 o'clock last night, he was still out. He's a farmer. He was still out planting corn. And this is the owner of a small farm. So to say that farm workers will work, 9 to 5, 8-hour shifts with overtime, it is absolutely unrealistic for this industry, and from everything I've heard, it will drive especially the smaller farms totally out of business, and it'll just be a crying shame what this will do to the farming community. I've had some farmers say that they would just switch to crops that didn't require people to a lot of manpower in order to harvest, that they would just go to crops that were mechanized, where it was all mechanized. And that doesn't serve anybody's purpose either. You know, agriculture is our number one industry in the state. We've got to stand up for it.
I can't remember if it was you or Assemblyman Wlea or Palmisano who included in their statement that the idea of running a family farm like other businesses doesn't make sense because some weeks and days, let alone weeks, there's a lot of hours, other times nothing at all. It just varies so much that it would be difficult to regulate that when it comes to things like overtime or mandatory rest.
Absolutely. And you know what the kicker is? As far as doing public hearings, the governor and all of the Democratic-controlled committees, they're not coming any farther than Syracuse. That's how far west they're coming in the state to have public hearings on the subject. And then they just want to retreat back to Albany and New York City and make their decisions. They should come out and they should see what we do and how we do it and what the importance of our farms and our farm workers are, because they would have a totally different view. Although I talked to a lady from Cornell Cooperative who told me that when she told a downstate Democratic Assembly person that they should come up and see our farms and talk to the workers, the reaction was, if I traveled up there and if the farm workers were smiling, I would know it was a setup. And that was it. How do you even talk to somebody with that mentality? They're not even open-minded to learn.
Talking with Republican Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes. Assemblywoman, you had an idea for a legislation and a bill on tax exemptions for firefighters. Tell us about that. Well,
obviously, our volunteer firefighters, everybody that's a first responder and in emergency services, so many of them are volunteer. And, for example, even our fire departments, you know, in my district, other than the city of Hornell, which has a paid fire department, everybody else is volunteer. And they are sacrificing tremendously to do more and more required training in order to even keep their certifications to volunteer. It's unfortunately making it harder and harder for people to keep volunteering and be part of our community in this respect. So what this will do is it does set a threshold of a certain number of calls or certain percentages of calls that you have to go on, but you can earn a tax exemption so that hopefully when you fill out your taxes, you'll get some more extra money coming back because of this additional exemption to help make all of the training and all the work you do a little bit more palatable, and also is at least a small sign that the state cares about the sacrifices that you're making. Now, I've heard from a number of individuals that they think that the threshold that was set is too high. And I've assured them I'll look into it, and if in fact it is, and it might be, then, you know, next year, if we can't get it done this year, we only have a couple more weeks, a few more weeks in the session, then next year we will try to tweak it and do it so it's more inclusive, so that, you know, our volunteers know that there's a reason they're making these sacrifices, and especially so that they know their state does care about them.
Talking to Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes, Albany Democrats are getting into Washington politics. They're working to make it so they want to get a law passed so that if President Trump pardons someone, that New York State can go after anyone that Trump pardons. Albany Democrats are also working to get the Trump's tax records released. We're going to find out what Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes thinks of that in just a moment. We're going to check the forecast right after this break. Stay with us.
If you're like me, you take walking seriously, so you wear Go Walks from Skechers. They're the only walking shoes I know that have the 5 Ables. What does that mean? You want walking shoes that are comfortable, breathable, washable, adorable, and affordable. That's the 5 Ables, and Skechers Go Walks have it all. They've got air-cooled Goga-Mat insoles for lasting comfort. They're made with washable, breathable materials. They're adorable, and they're wonderfully affordable. They're very able shoes. Get Skechers Go Walks at a Skechers store near you or wherever stylish shoes are sold.
There's nothing like meeting face-to-face, and there's nothing like Zoom to make that happen. Zoom lets you connect and do business across town or around the world. Zoom ties together all of your communication needs into one easy platform for video conferencing, phone calls, group chat, webinars, and your conference rooms. Connect easily from anywhere, your mobile phone, your laptop, or conference room. Zoom is how business gets done. Get your free account at Zoom.com today. Meet happy with Zoom.
Checking in now with meteorologist Gary Best, who's saying, what, Gary? Nice today, not so nice tomorrow?
Well, I mean, it's going to be warm today. It's going to be cooler tomorrow, but both days may feature at least a few scattered showers, so we have to watch out for that. This morning, sunrise was at 5:42. It'll set at 8:34 this evening, and we're looking at partial sunshine through the clouds during today, a bit breezy, and there could be a few rain showers coming in, mainly for this afternoon. About 75 to 80, though, for the high temperature. Tonight down around 55 with some scattered clouds, mix of clouds and sun for tomorrow. Just a slight chance for a shower. Most of Friday should be rain-free. And cooler, 65 to 70, 50s for Friday night. Saturday, mostly cloudy with a chance of afternoon showers and thunderstorms. It'll be 75 to 80 on Saturday. And again, a chance of widely scattered showers and storms on Sunday, near 80 degrees. More of the same likely for the holiday on Monday.
Talking to Republican Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes live this morning on the Newsmaker show. Assemblywoman, I think there was something you said during the break that you wanted to add in about the farm legislation coming out of Albany?
Yes, thank you very much. I also wanted to make sure that your listeners knew that Steuben County, as well as Livingston County, or the county governments, have both passed resolutions strongly supporting the farmers and strongly opposing the farm workers bill. So your local governments are out there fighting for you too, and doing everything they can to advocate for the rights of farmers, which I actually think is also advocating for farm workers. There's a lot of farm workers who have no problem working many hours when it's called for because they understand exactly what the nature of farming is.
Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes, what about this idea of Albany Democrats work, and this is not just in the legislature, but I believe Tish James is involved with this too, getting involved with Washington politics, working to get the Trump's business tax records released?
It's ridiculous. It did pass the Assembly yesterday. I voted against it. I voted against it for a lot of reasons. First, I just think it's fundamentally wrong no matter who the president is. But also, the legislation also included language that would allow the chairman of certain committees to also have access to the records, the income tax records of me, of any political party boss, and also any state employee. I mean, it is incredibly broad how they worded this bill. So while they, in their minds, want to target the president, they've targeted just about everyone who receives a paycheck or is any way involved in any way, shape, or form with working for the state or even, I believe, a municipality. It's just way too broad. It allows for too much abuse. I can foresee that this is going to be used totally as a weapon to go after political opponents as opposed to actually making sure that laws are being adhered to.
Assemblywoman Byrnes, recently Governor Andrew Cuomo said, and this was after some of the southern states started coming out with anti-abortion legislation and rulings. Governor Andrew Cuomo said other states should imitate New York State and codify Roe v. Wade, make Roe v. Wade the law of their states, just like New York State did. I was reading an article that pointed out that in this writer's opinion that I was reading, Cuomo is actually inspiring other states, like Louisiana and Alabama, to go in the other direction because they're horrified at what they see coming out of New York State. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's probably correct. We do hear of some states that do want to follow the New York model, which is really scary. Because even if, and I do know a lot of people who don't have in their own minds a problem with abortion in the first trimester, but once you start getting into bills that allow an abortion right up until the time of birth of viable fetuses based upon some undefined health reason, that's scary. That's frightening. And it's just so inhuman that I can't believe that other states want to follow our example. And by ours, I mean our states, not mine personally. I assure you, I voted against it. But I have heard about that knee-jerk reaction, where other states, seeing where this state is going and the path that it's taking our citizens down, is so afraid of that becoming any type of norm or acceptable behavior, legally or morally, that they are acting out exactly the opposite.
Well, we're just about out of time. We've been talking with Republican Assemblywoman Marjorie Byrnes. Assemblywoman, I want to thank you very much for coming on live with us this morning.
It's my pleasure. And again, I do hope that in the near future we can get back together. There's going to be, I think, more coming down about the Livingston Correctional Facility closing as far as details in Livingston County doing a FOIL in order to get information from the state. But also in these next few weeks of the legislative session, there's going to be a lot of really major bills coming through, other than the farm workers bill, that I think that it's important for your listeners to be up on top of.
With that, we have to leave it. Assemblywoman, thank you again for joining us.
My regards. We'll talk soon.